The Stone Wolf, Part 2, by Christopher James Loosely, 40 years after the War of the Gods. Tanjin was silent as he prepared for the journey from the Bleeding Mountain tribe. He thanked the chieftain for his hospitality, but would not speak a word to Witch Doctor Marique. To keep up appearances, he didn't goad and insult Razgar, for he had earned their favour. Even the guards that accompanied Tanjin had stayed their hands, whilst clamping Razgar in his shackles, rather than whip or beat him. As they left, Razgar gave Marique a final nod of respect, which was duly returned as the cart left sight.
Your insolence be making a mockery of me, slave,
Tanjin said, with a quick dagger slash across Razgar's chest as soon as they were out of sight. Razgar growled, but said nothing, knowing he'd be on the wrong end of a beating.
Your father told me to make sure you die in the fighting pits. I've only kept you around this long 'cause you make me a lot of coin. But after the dishonor you just brought me, I have a right mind to kill you myself and finally go home,
he snarled as he stared at the dagger in his hand.
Do it then, you coward. Take the knife to my throat and rid yourself of me,
Razgar replied nonchalantly, leaning back in the cart, chuckling to himself.
Oh, I got me a better idea,
Tanjin continued, the words slivering from his pompous smile.
We be going to the Golden Lion tribe next. They be closest to the realm of Tenebrae, and have a collection of northern monsters for their fighting pits. I tell them to put you against the biggest, strongest, most dangerous monster they got, and I put all me coin against you,
he said between guffaws.
Maybe I be winning,
Razgar replied, slowly, deliberately, a smug grin curling on his face as he laid his hands behind his head, staring at the ever-present dark void that blanketed the tribelands as well as Tenebrae. However, Tanjin didn't take the bait, his slimy voice spilling out like poisonous honey.
I be thinking you're not gonna be doing that. You're gonna fight, and you're gonna fight well. But eventually whatever beast they pitch against gonna start ripping chunks off you,
Tanjin answered with a guttural laugh as he mindlessly poked at one of his tusks, which were less than half the length of Razgar's, whose expression shifted into a snide smile.
Ya be careful with those ickle things, Tanjin. You'll never find a mate if they get any smaller.
Razgar's laugh eclipsed Tanjin's as the troll slaver was silenced with embarrassment. Even his guards had to stifle a chuckle as he trembled with rage.
You think you're so funny, slave. You be forgetting who be the one in chains and who be holding the rod that beat you.
Once again, a grin widened on Tanjin's face, and though Razgar's laugh settled into silence, a knowingly gloating expression darkened his face.
But you're not be the one who put me in chains, are you, Tanjin?
Razgar said, slowly, mockingly.
If my father hadn't handed me over, you'd never be in a position to beat me. Useless as a soldier, incompetent as a witch doctor. The only reason me father kept you around was 'cause you're laughably loyal, too brainless to think for yourself.
He said no more, instead leaning back, letting the words seep in. Tanjin did not reply, though Razgar could see he wanted to. But the old troll knew Razgar was right, even if he would never admit it, even to himself. The sun rose and fell beyond the endless, unshifting blanket that obscured the sky, and each passing day was travelled along a road of silence. Occasionally they'd pass another slaver, though travellers seldom spoke to each other on the road. Tanjin must have been desperate to rid himself of Razgar, to bypass at least a dozen towns and villages with decent fighting pits. The old troll knew that Razgar would be victorious in each of them. This gave Razgar some comfort, knowing that Tanjin would go through so much effort to ensure the young wolf's demise. On the 5th day, Dara Den, the city of the Golden Lion tribe, gleamed upon the horizon, and it was golden. With contacts in the northern realm of Tenebrae, beyond the mountain pass, the tribe was hugely wealthy, the wealthiest of the troll lands, laden with gold and comforts beyond imagining. They adopted human architecture, slept on beds, ate with cutlery from plates and bowls of metal. They were barely even trolls anymore. They bred and hunted majestic lions, beasts brought from the north, even further than Tenebrae during the War of the Gods. To many of the trolls' dismays, their goddess Azin had been soundly defeated, her body being taken by the other gods who invaded Azin's land and killed her people. The Golden Lion tribe both revered the beasts they hunted and adorned themselves with their pelts. The wild cats had been a gift from Azin, and the tribe used them to worship her memory, as well as portray themselves as her chosen, her worthy, her favourites. Razgar gazed upon the magnificent golden temple, taller than any troll structure, which was built in the goddess's honour. Razgar sneered at the sight, for he did not share such high regards for the Dark Lady. They approached the city's walls, another human invention adopted by the tribe, which Razgar did not approve of, as his face contorted into a grimace. The guards at the gate stopped the cart, as Tanjin explained his reason for entering, as a finely decorated troll strolled out to speak with him. He was draped with one of the lion pelts, its head and mane serving as a beautiful and intimidating headdress, which marked him as one of the tribe's greatest warriors, for only those who proved themselves were allowed such an honor. But it wasn't just the pelt that showed great honor. His tusks were wrapped with golden bands, piercings covered his ears and face, all gold, a mark of wealth and success in Dara Den.
Ah, so this be the son of the great stone wolf himself. I be hearing of your victories in the south. But here, you be fighting things that only exist in the darkest places of the world. Things that you thought only existed in your nightmares.
The guard said with a sinister chuckle. Razgar kept his composure, barely even acknowledging the troll looming over him.
I already be tiring of this place. Pit me against your strongest monster, so I could be out of this place as fast as possible.
Razgar replied condescendingly, with Tanjin growling at the young wolf's impudence. However, the guard simply laughed.
Even here, in your rickety old cart, you still be acting like a chieftain,
the troll said, narrowing his eyes, with Razgar responding in kind. But a smile broadened on the guard's face.
But you be showing spirit. I like that. Tell you what, should you defeat a monster of my choosing, maybe I convince the chief to gift ya a pelt of your very own. No one has ever beaten Kaithos. I think you be earning it, should you win.
The troll's smile was sickening and grotesque. No doubt many a fighter had been destroyed by this Kaithos.
And what manner of monster is Kaithos?
Razgar replied, without even looking the troll in the eye, as he casually picked at his fingernails.
Kaithos be a giant,
the guard responded, slimily, smugly. Razgar stopped dead, his heart almost joining him. He remembered the giants from the war, with some of them being able to decimate entire units of trolls in but a few swings. He refused to let his fear show on his face, but his silence was all the guard needed in order to gloat.
As I said, ya be earning your own belt, should ya win.
And without another word, the guard ushered them through the gate, with Tanjin almost glowing with a gloatingly pompous expression on his face. Razgar knew he would die in this city, that there was no strategy for fighting a giant. Their skin was thick and tough. Even without armor, they could pose a significant threat. They had strength beyond strength, able to wield weapons that needed several trolls to be able to move, and their skin was resistant to fire. They were truly foes to be feared and respected. As they traversed the streets, Razgar's fear slowly melted away into a silent resentment for everything around him. Houses, shops, cobbled roads, all things adopted from humans and Iduard of the north. Trolls were a race of the land and humble living. They were respected because they were naturally superior in battle to most of the other races, whereas the humans and Iduard had to forge weapons and armor and build castles and fortresses. Even the streets were littered with merchants from the north. He grunted and growled at their smooth, round, unblemished faces, something which Tanjin found amusing. Even the fighting pit was unlike anything else in the realm. Most were carved into the very earth or into the rock of a mountain, but this monstrosity was built with brick and mortar. It was bigger than some of the troll villages and stood dozens of feet high. It was draped with banners of fine fabrics of different colors, with embroidered symbols of the Golden Lion tribe. Its walls were finely carved into beautiful designs by master craftsmen, and Razgar despised it. As they approached the great iron portcullis, Razgar gazed upon the Golden Lion's witch doctor, and knew he would not be receiving the same treatment as he did from Marik. This one held himself like a human lord, his pompous features barely moving as the cart stopped in front of him. He too wore the prestigious lion pelt, with the green and blue shrakesh feathers weaved into the mane. The golden bands on his tusks were beautifully designed, each tusk having two, which were joined by tiny, intricate gold chains. Tanjin approached the witch doctor, bowing low.
Noble Senwi, it is an honor to be received into your tribe. Please, allow me to offer my tribute to Chief Zola for your hospitality,
Tanjin said, groveling before the witch doctor. Razgar cringed for the 100th time as he listened to the same rehearsed speech he'd heard in every tribe they'd been to. Senway gave a brief glance to Razgar, his disdain plainly visible on his face as he looked down his nose at him before turning to Tanjin. Razgar found it odd that Senway did not wear the mask of the witch doctor, but realized that it was just another troll tradition dropped for the sake of adopting more human and Iduard culture.
Tanjin, of the Stone Wolf clan, you bring the traitorous son of Razen to our arena. You either really believe in his fighting prowess, or you really be wanting him to die,
Senway said with a smug chortle as he held out his hand for Tanjin to kiss. Yet another action, courtesy of human lords and royalty. Tanjin did so without hesitation, but Razgar could not help but scoff at the display. The punishment was swift as the back of Senway's ringed hand struck Razgar across the face.
Your insolence will not be tolerated here, whelp. Apologies, Honorable Senwi,
Razgar replied, rising in the cart before bowing. His fight would already be unfavorable without angering the city's witch doctor in the process. He was proud, but he was not suicidal. Senway nodded, before turning back to Tanjin as they discussed the offerings as well as the fight. As the two conversed, Razgar sat back in the cart, cross-legged, inspecting the scarring on his shoulder, the only remnants of his fight with Korgeth. As the two finished their discussion, Tanjin and his two guards bowed before wandering off into the city. Senway gestured for Razgar to follow, which he did without argument. The pair traversed the winding corridors underneath the arena, before coming to an altar not dissimilar to the one at the Bleeding Mountain Tribe. Senway instructed him to take his position as attendants filed out with cloths and jugs. Razgar was baffled by the proceeding, but was not about to turn down the sacred rites of his people. Senway did not perform the same chants as Marik, instead choosing another to stand in his place while he spoke to Razgar.
Tanjin told me of the wager that Yetu offered ya,
Senway said, almost raising a dry smile as the attendants bathed Razgar.
Usually, I'd be content with throwing ya to your fate with nothing but a spear. But this deal be intriguing me. A duel with a giant, with our most prestigious garment on the line. Slave or not, such a feat would be worthy of such a prize.
With no idea how to respond, Razgar simply bowed his head. Would they really keep their word for such a victory? Or did they really have such little faith that anyone could best a giant in single combat? It didn't matter, for he would make sure it was the greatest duel that anyone had ever seen, and even if he died, he would have done so being honored in the sacred ritual so often denied to him. Content with his fate, a smile appeared on Razgar's face before replying.
You've done me a great honor. In return, I be giving your city the greatest spectacle your arena's ever seen.
Razgar thumped his fist over his chest, which prompted what looked to be a genuine smile from Senway.
If you truly believe those words, then I will extend another kindness. Follow me to the armory, and I will allow you to choose what you die in.
Despite his choice of words, Senway's voice had a genuine sincerity to it, which offered a sense of comfort to Razgar, and, with a hearty smile, the two trolls set their sights to the armory. Razgar paced up and down the racks of some of the most sublime armor and weapons he'd ever seen. Despite his distaste for Idward armor, he could not deny its most splendid work and craftsmanship. Some of the breastplates and pauldrons depicted great beasts which were embossed into the metal, while some had intricate patterning. More than once, Razgar even considered picking up a set of pauldrons, a beautiful pair of steel wolf heads. He was torn between sticking to his heritage as he normally would, or following his word of putting on a great show.
May I make a suggestion?
Senway asked, noticing Razgar's hesitation. Razgar nodded gratefully, stepping to the side so the witch doctor could find what he was looking for. Along with the wolf head pauldrons, Senway picked up a matching pair of greaves as well as a leather belt attached to a plain linen skirt. Razgar received them with a mild feeling of contentment, knowing that the wolf motifs honored his homeland. But then something caught his eye. Further down the line was a series of other animal pelts, such as bears and foxes, but only one would satisfy the young wolf. The arena was set, and over 1,000 spectators fitted into the stands, all howling with bloodlust for the games that were unfolding. From all over the tribelands, trolls came for the spectacular games that were held in Dara Den. The foreign warriors that were brought south gave a change of style to the fights, which excited the patrons. Beasts from the north were always grand events, such as manticores, great lizards from the dense swamplands, and even the occasional boran, a huge, rhino-like beast with horns running all the way up its head and to the crest of its spine. The boran was rare, and usually a beast of burden, but with their 3-foot-long front horn, armoured muzzle, and dragon-like scales, they were a great opening event against the lower-caliber fighters. As Razgar prepared himself for his own fight, 2 brothers had been pitted against a manticore. The pair had put on quite the performance, with one managing to cut the wings from its back, whilst the other sliced up the scorpion-like tail that had felled more than its fair share of victims. However, a beaten animal will bare its teeth to the last, and in a final panic, it had managed to bite down across one of the brothers' abdomens, with him having to be carried out of the arena, though still living. With the other brother strutting victoriously out of the arena, Razgar stood by the exit, ready to be called. Kitted out in the most armour he'd ever worn, he truly looked like a chieftain, or even a barbarian king. The grey wolf pelt that adorned his head and back made his already intimidating features look far more terrifying, and the armour that had been chosen for him was beginning to appeal to him. In his hands he held 2 Kopesh swords, taken from a Leonian warrior who had fallen in the arena, as well as a steel-tipped spear, which he hoped would provide better results than a flint one. He breathed deeply as Senway addressed the crowd.
People of Daraten, honored guests of our city, and great Chief Zola, I humbly bring you tonight's final match. This will be a fight to remember, for we will have a one-on-one duel against the giant Kaifos.
Many in the crowd stopped to make sure they heard right, whilst those who just wanted blood were still howling and cheering. But even Chief Zola was intrigued, as she sat atop her throne of gold and bone, leaning forward, ready to hear more.
Our challenger is the son of the Stone Wolf Razen and destroyer of clans, Razgar!
The arena erupted, some for Kaifos, some for Razgar, but all for blood and battle. Before Senway could finish, Zola stood, silencing the crowd. Like Senway, Zola was greatly decorated in gold, with her shorter tusks having gold caps. However, she also boasted the red war paint of her people, and looked just as ready to fight as the gladiators.
Senway, this be quite a matchup, but what makes a troll so confident to fight a giant on his own?
Zola asked, sparking chatter throughout the crowd, but Razgar scoffed at the word confident.
Our mighty chief, upon entering our great city, he asked Yetu to put him against our strongest monster. As a token of goodwill, Yetu offered him one of our sacred lion pelts, should he win.
The chatter rose into rumbles of excitement, while Senway awaited Zola's decision.
A worthy prize for victory,
Zola called out, as the entire arena thundered in cheers and applause. With approval from his chief, Senway continued his introductions.
Representing our glorious city, undefeated in 240 fights, Kaifos the Unbreakable!
Senway bellowed to the continuous applause.
Facing him from the Stone Wolf clan, undefeated in 109 matches, and the only combatant to defeat Korgeth, champion of the Bleeding Mountain tribe, Razgar the Destroyer!
Razgar entered the arena, his blood pumping from the crowd's howls. He raised his weapons to the sky and basked in his final fight. The arena fell into silence as the portcullis was raised on the other side, and the thunderous stomps of the giant echoed through the halls and onto the sands. Wrapped only in furs, and his only armor being an iron-horned helm, Kaifos lumbered into the arena with a two-sided, pronged steel warhammer with a huge wooden shaft. Standing at 14 feet, Kaifos was double the height of Razgar, as well as multiple times the width. The giant said nothing, and Razgar wondered if he was even able to speak, but was more interested in getting the match started. So he stabbed the spear into the sand and lowered himself into a fighting stance. Upon the signal, Kaifos let out what could only be described as a dragon's roar, as he bounded towards Razgar, who let out his own war cry as he sprinted towards the giant. Kaifos swung his hammer in front of him, forcing Razgar to roll underneath it. He attempted to swipe the giant's thigh, with the khopesh allowing an easy cut through the furs, yet the strike did little more than mark the skin beneath. With surprising agility for his size, Kaifos swiveled before Razgar had fully gotten behind him. With a downward strike, he barely missed Razgar as he rolled to the side. While Kaifos recovered, Razgar took another try, this time trying to stab the giant's exposed thigh, but still to minimal success, with only the slightest trickle of blood running from the scratch. However, Razgar had drawn first blood, and that was something he could be proud of. Knowing he had to put on a show, Razgar raised the bloodied sword into the air, with the spectators erupting with excitement. However, turning your attention from a rampaging giant is never the soundest strategy, and with a split second's notice, the troll barely rolled out of the way of another swing. Zola watched on, lounging on her throne, with an intrigued grin, as she stroked her chin. Knowing he couldn't be that careless again, Razgar focused on Kaifos alone. He also knew that trying to cut the giant up was not going to be a fruitful endeavor, and decided to stick to more flashy movements that would at least hold the crowd's attention. Kaifos would swing, and Razgar would dodge, before rapping him across the knuckles with his khopesh, which seemed to have a greater effect than against his leg. With each predictable swing, Razgar added another slice across Kaifos' knuckles, to the point where the giant had to let go of his hammer with one hand. Razgar saw the opportunity to relieve Kaifos of his hammer entirely, but as he raised his sword for another blow, an unexpected kick sent him flying backwards, losing a khopesh in the act. Scrambling for his weapon and winded from the blow, Razgar was not quick enough to avoid the next swing, which tore the pauldron from his left shoulder, with the hammer's prongs biting deep into Razgar's flesh, both dislocating and breaking his shoulder. This time there was no pretending. A howl of pain filled the air, and Razgar knew he could not use it. He was finished. Tanjin sneered as Razgar struggled to dodge and roll, half crippled and barely escaping his inevitable fate. Senway and Chief Zola looked on in a mixture of pity and disappointment, watching what seemed to now be a pathetic display. There was only one more option, but Razgar wondered if he could even pull it off with only one arm. He chanced to look behind him, seeing that he wasn't far from his spear. Another swing, another roll. Razgar was only a few feet away. Just one more, just one. There! Kaifos gave a mighty downward swing, with Razgar rolling backwards one more time. Whilst Kaifos recovered from such a big swing, Razgar grabbed the spear with his good hand and wound up his arm for one final blow. Kaifos was now ready and was winding up for his own swing. As the hammer came crashing down, Razgar gave the truest throw that he could manage. The troll was engulfed by a billowing sand cloud as the agonized screech of the giant pierced the air and the crowd fell to silence. With his final shot, Razgar had managed to put his spear through the eye hole of the giant's helm. With a foot of spear shaft piercing his head, Kaifos could do nothing but collapse into the sand with a dying whimper. With no sign of life on the arena floor, the crowd stared in silence until the dust cloud subsided, revealing Razgar on the ground, clutching at his ruined arm. In a fit of excitement and joy, Senway jumped into the arena and sprinted to Razgar to confirm he was still breathing. The witch doctor lifted Razgar's head, beckoning him to stir.
Did I win?
Razgar wheezed as he opened his eyes to the absolute joyous face of Senway, who couldn't believe what he was seeing. The witch doctor helped Razgar to his feet, with only one thing left to say.
Razgar is victorious!
Senway bellowed, raising Razgar's good arm in triumph, with one last explosive round of roars and howls from the crowd. All except one. Tanjin seethed and foamed at Razgar's victory, knowing he'd bet all his coin against him, almost snapping one of his tusks in frustration. In the infirmary, Razgar was having his wounds treated, balmed and bandaged. The troll sat with an air of pride about him, and he had every right to. No troll had ever bested a giant in single combat. He barely noticed the pain as his attendants fawned over him, all hoping to earn the attention of a giant slayer. However, Tanjin burst into the room, his usual beating rod at the ready, as he stormed over to where Razgar was sitting.
How dare ya! How dare ya! I lost everything! Everything!
Tanjin bellowed, raising the rod, but was promptly halted by Senway.
Who do ya think ya are, coming in here, attacking the fighters? Ya be forgetting your place, ickle thing.
The witch doctor warned, flanked on either side by a guard. Still enraged, Tanjin waved the rod at Senway with unbridled fury in his eyes.
That be my fighter, my property. I will beat him to death if it is my wish. That mongrel has cost me every coin I own.
Tanjin shouted as menacingly as he could, forgetting who he was speaking to.
While you're in my city, you'll be following our rules. Maybe you prefer we take your life now, so your loss be meaning nothing to ya. Or maybe we be keeping you alive, so when we march upon your tribe, your chief can see who brought his people to ruin.
Senway's words hit Tanjin hard, and he fell very silent, very quickly.
If it's coin you're worried about, I may have a proposition that can remedy your plight.
Came a voice from behind. It was that of a human, a man dressed in fine clothing and sporting a neatly groomed beard with a circlet of gold sat atop his long brown hair.
What you be proposing?
Tanjin asked suspiciously. The man pulled out a hefty pouch of gold coins and threw it to Tanjin.
That's around 200 gold coins, with much more to come if you sell your fighter to me.
The man smiled as Tanjin thought it over.
I offer this piffling amount as a taster. Come with me to Nandir in Tenebrae, and I shall grant you 2,000 gold coins for your giant slayer.
A sneer curled onto Tanjin's face as he settled his mind.
That be a fair trade, and I be finally free of the cockroach,
Tanjin replied as the man beckoned him to speak more. Once the pair had left the room, Senway stood in front of Razgar the Destroyer, both proud and humbled to have witnessed such a feat.
So, ya be sold off to the big arena,
he said, placing a hand on Razgar's good shoulder. The young wolf scoffed, following it with a chuckle.
Trading one master for another, but at least I be rid of Tanjin. Tell me, what is Nandir like?
Razgar asked, but a blank look fell over Senway's face.
In truth, me be having no idea. No one who goes comes back. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. However, you'll be one of the greatest warriors I ever seen. And a deal be a deal. Please accept the lion pelt that you earned so spectacularly.
Senway replied, gesturing to another attendant who held the pelt ready.
Ah, that be sacred to your people. I could never accept it. But I do have another request, if ya be feeling generous.
Razgar chuckled, with Senway raising an eyebrow.
I grown quite attached to this wolf pelt. It would mean more to me and my heritage if I could take this instead.
Senway smiled at Razgar, nodding slightly.
Only if you promise to accept it. Should you make it back here, a free troll.
Senway replied, with the pair of them reaching out to shake hands.
Oh, and feel free to keep the armor. It suits ya.
Senway remarked, with a chuckle of his own.
Thank you, honored Senway. One day I will return, and my life will be my own once more.